you're interested in expanding your universe, each one of them will have something that's interesting and new.
It all takes place in the space of less than an hour.
The questions were very knowledge-based. Take the work hat off, look at something cool, and think about things in a different way.
So I'm now going to hand over to you, Ruby. I'm looking forward to hear what you've got to say.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you for inviting me, OGTC, to take part in this morning's webinar. If my face crumples up, it just means that the Wi-Fi has gone a bit funky, but we do have the wonderful Charlene in the background, so if you do hear me going, next slide, Charlene, that just means that I'm talking to her. It's not that I'm talking to my dog. So, as Susan said, I'm an organisational psychologist, and we have a background in human factors. And I've been working with the OGTC looking at the psychological factors that influence on technology adoption. But I'm here this morning to talk to you about something which is literally a little bit closer to home to me, and how we can best support working at home during the coronavirus. Now, for those of you who know me a little bit, a lot of this presentation is based on a LinkedIn post that I did a couple of weeks ago, and we got such a good response from it that we've turned it into a webinar. So Charlene, if we could get started on the first slide. So I've been working at home since I was a student, and I've always really enjoyed working at home because I found I was really productive when it came to doing particular tasks. So if you had a lot of work that you needed to do, you could chunk it up and get through it. However, there is an expectation if you say that you work at home that you're probably in your pajamas, you've probably got the TV on, you probably haven't had a shower, and you're not really being that productive. And whilst there is probably, if we're honest, an element of that, as I think we've all been finding over the last couple of weeks, it requires a particular set of discipline and skill set to do this properly. However, in our normal situation, it's a choice. And I think that's an important thing that we start out with, that if you were talking about working at home, it's something that we've negotiated, something that we want to do. But as of the 23rd of March, we're now in lockdown. We're now at the end of week 5 of remote working and working from home. And because we are in this situation where it's not really a choice, we have to do it, it's removed a lot of our sense of control. And understandably, a lot of people are feeling claustrophobic, anxious about losing control, and are really struggling. So, Charlene, let's get going on the next set. This is where we've came up with our 7 tips for supporting working from home. I would just say before I say anything else that this is based on my own experience, and you will probably have to experiment a little bit. But if you can get 1 or 2 things that help you over the next 20 minutes, I'll be thrilled. So, as we're all familiar with, fake it till you make it, dress the part, you look the part, you feel the part. As we'll all notice, I've got some nice sparkly earrings and a nice bit of lippy on. And we're all quite familiar with that. That if you feel a little bit down, it always does help if you put on something a little bit smarter. And it can have practical reasons if you suddenly have to jump on a Zoom or a Skype or whatever we're doing now. But I think it's fair to say we're all pretty used to seeing each other now in various states of undress and dishevelment and small children and straighteners and what have you. So I'm not really suggesting that dressing up or putting something smarter on is for others. I'm more suggesting it's for yourself. Before we did all this, our normal routine really was to get up. Maybe you have a particular routine, but that will include putting on your work clothes, and that puts on you as a work self. And putting on these items can really help improve your self-esteem, and all of these things help you put you in the right mindset to be more productive. Now, I currently have made everybody in my household go out so that I can do this. But we can't all have that option, and we're all aware that we're sharing our homes with lots of different people who are also trying to work at home, and we need to install some social boundaries. So having our right set of clothes on can really help us to put in a boundary that says, okay, I'm now work Ruby. I would love to chat about what the neighbours are doing, but I'll do that later. So Charlene, if we can pop on to the next one. There is a reason that dressing the part or putting on the right clothes can help us. And this is to do with the way that our memory works. So as we go around the world, we make memories, and we encode these from our short-term memory. So that's the pieces of information that are in your head just now as I'm talking, and we put them into long-term memory. And as we do that, we associate these cues with these memories. So these cues could be people, places, things, what have you. So we're essentially learning through association. And it's these cues in our environment that can guide our behavior. So if anybody out there has taken a Psych 101 class, what I'm actually talking about is classic Pavlovian conditioning. So in our lower right-hand corner, I have a little example of our Pavlovian conditioning, which is essentially where Pavlov combined the sound of a ding, ding, ding bell with dog food. And he combined this sound and the dog food sufficient a number of times that when the dog then heard the ding, ding bell, he thought of the dog food. So what I'm suggesting is that our clothes act as the bell for our behaviors and for certain mindsets that we want to get into when we're thinking about working from home. And so we associate our work clothes with lots of work behaviors because we have different sets of behaviors and different modes per se when we're at work than we do when we're relaxing at home. Next slide, please, Charlene. And I would suggest that we can do the same thing when it comes to our workspace. So in our working environment, so the things that are all around me, these are environmental cues that indicate to me and remind me about different behaviors, different memories, different things. And so what I'm suggesting is thinking about how your work environment will then indicate how you're supposed to behave. And we can see this in a particular type of memory. So we call this context-dependent learning, which essentially means you're better remembering something in the same situation in which you learned it. And it can be a really effective way of helping you improve your performance for things like exams or interview performance, all these different kind of things, if you prepare in a similar environment as you would when you have to do it for the real thing. So it can be helpful to try and replicate your working environment when you're at home. Now, I know that we don't all have really beautiful, nicely paneled offices which are perfectly ergonomic and organized, but there are neat ways of doing it. If you normally had your phone, for example, on your left-hand side, try doing that at home. If you don't have a permanent workspace, assemble your workspace in wherever is clear and comfortable, and then at the end of your working day, disassemble your temporary workspace, put it in its bag and put it in a cupboard so that it's out of the way. Because what can happen sometimes is we develop misassociations. So in my little corner there, we have a cute picture of a disheveled looking bed. Now, we probably are all guilty of doing a little bit of work while we're sitting in bed, checking emails, sitting on the couch. It is more comfortable. But unfortunately, what can happen is we can essentially condition ourselves over, say, the course of a week or so to associate our places of relaxation, our places of comfort with stress, with doing work, with emails, with things that we need to do, so that when we then come to go and relax and go to sleep, it's much harder for us to switch off. So Charlene, next one. Thank you. And developing our workspace has been very helpful for our social reasons. If you see me sitting at my desk, see me sitting at this computer screen, that means that I'm working. And likewise, when I see other members of my household doing that, I know that they're in work mode. And when I come away from that space, I'm no longer, we're free to chat, we're free to gossip about the neighbors, whatever you want. Now, I'm not an ergonomist, but I am very guilty for reaching, slouching, and craning. And this is really unpleasant because it can give you chronic back pain, it can give you tension, and we have enough going on without that. So when you're thinking about setting up your workspace, have what you need around you. There's no point in running around all the time getting it. But if you don't need it in the next 2 to 3 hours, put it away, because too much stuff around you can be really distracting. When you're thinking about where can I sit then if I'm not supposed to sit on the couch, try and find a table where when you're sitting, your elbow is at a 90-degree angle and your monitor is approximately an arm's length away, with your eye at screen level. Now, I've included this link here particularly because it's a medical professional talking about 3 minutes of how to set up your workspace correctly. So Charlene, next slide, please. Thank you. One of the biggest things that we're now suffering from is our sense of control. And I think we mentioned that a little bit earlier. Now, our sense of control is a fundamental need. It's an evolutionary adaptation. And it means that if we have a sense of control, we then also have other needs as humans fulfilled. Now, I'm not going to talk about these other 3 or 4 needs that we have, but I've included them because at this point in time in our current corona situation, we probably don't have these. We don't have a sense of certainty of what's going to happen. There are lots of projects and tasks that we can't control, that we can't complete, and that's out with our ability to do so. And we don't necessarily know what's going to happen. And again, irrespective of what you see on the news, we don't necessarily know when this will end. But developing a sense of control is really important for our basic well-being, our happiness. And as we're seeing, and it's all over the media just now, when we don't get that, we can see really negative impacts on things to do with our happiness, our self-esteem, and our physical health. Next one, Charlene. Thank you. Having said all of that kind of miserable stuff, much of our sense of control is a perception. We really can't control most of the environment. Most of the world is completely out with our control, and yet we can cope with that because we can instill a sense of control into our environment. And we can use neat little things to do with our consumer psychology. So you have a preference for choice-induced preference where you prefer an option irrespective of whether it's different or not. So I would suggest give yourself choices, and these may be entirely made up. So choose your outfits, choose your meals, when you want to take your lunch breaks, how you want to take your coffee breaks, because you should still be taking coffee breaks. And you can even do this where you're then starting to structure your week better, so that you're then asking yourself, what would I like to do? Now, there's lots of things that we can't choose, but we can give ourselves a sense of that control. Next one, Charlene. Thank you. And we can do that. Oh, am I missing a slide? Oh, well, never mind. Oh, there we go. Thank you. The one with the circle. That's perfect. So we can do this where we're creating a sense of choice in combination with structuring our day. Now, I'm not going to talk about our circadian rhythm and this in a complex way. All I'm suggesting is that we can use our internal body clock and the various different physiological changes that happen across the day to help us structure our day. So you'll notice that at around 10 o'clock, we're highly alert, which is helpful because we're about 11:15, so this is helpful. And then in our afternoon, we're things to do with coordination and reaction time. Next one, Charlene. So if we keep these in mind, we can then plan our days better. So we can think about our morning and afternoon tasks, because we will all be slightly different, but we will have an understanding of, are you better in the morning or in the afternoon? Are there some tasks that you find easier than others? And can you then help that to structure yourself? And you can even combine this out with by asking yourself, what do I prefer? What would be easier for me? What can I do in combination with, the kids, or walking the dog, or getting your exercise? You will need to be flexible a little bit with this because everybody else is also doing it. One thing I wouldn't be so flexible on is your start and finish times. You need to stick to them, because what happens if you don't stick to them is when you work at home, you work at home. That means you can stay up until 11:30 at night answering emails, working on stats, or whatever you want. And unfortunately, this leads to burnout, and we have to be very careful about this just now. So if you can, try and stick to the same start and end times to maintain a sense of routine, a sense of continuity and control, and to do a little bit of self-care. Next one, Charlene. So this is pretty apparent. We're social creatures. When we are socializing, we live longer, we're happier. In our current context, if we socialize, it improves our immune system. There are extreme dangers of staying in isolation for too long, so much so that the US penal system use it as a form of punishment, and it's been used in Guantanamo Bay as a torture technique. Next one, Charlene. So this is my little plug for my normal everyday job, which is technology, technology, technology. We have a whole wealth of technologies available to us. There are things to do with MS Teams, Zoom, Skype, what have you. We're using them here this morning as part of our work-related things. But I would suggest that a lot of our time that we normally spend in the office is not work-related. We chat about the weekend, what are you doing this evening, etc. So why not use some of these technologies that we have to do a little bit of socializing, because that can really help in terms of our social bonds, boosting our morale, team cohesion, all of these things that make us better at our job. Next one, Charlene. So this is a giant slide. It's to do with really feeding your motivation. If we were doing our Psych 101 introduction to psychology, we would talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. These are 5 levels of need in terms of what motivates our behavior. I've included this to illustrate and to lay a little bit more grounding that at this point in time, lots of people aren't having their basic needs met. So in terms of our physiological ones, they maybe are unwell, they may be concerned about water or food, where am I going to get the next set of toilet roll from? Safety, what's happening with their jobs, money, their sense of belonging, you're feeling isolated, and all of this can impact on things like our self-esteem and our ability to do our job. Next one, Charlene. So what I would suggest is that we use a little trick. So as human beings, we are obsessed with the idea of completing things, and we can see that in our memory. And we have something called the Zeigarnik effect, where you're essentially more likely to remember unfinished tasks than completed ones. And this is where you get that itchy feeling in your brain when you know that you can't finish something or you didn't quite get it finished in time. So to boost your motivation and to help these kind of neurological desires, make a to-do list. And I know it sounds silly and a bit childish, but this can really help. Take your large chunk, huge tasks that feel totally, undoable, and turn them into realistic goals. So an example would be, don't write in your work diary or in your task list, check emails. Instead, write something attainable like send slides to Charlene, email Susan, read pictures, or something that you can attain. And doing that and keeping a record of these achievements can help you feel that you're actually much more productive than you really are. You also need to give yourself breaks, because we burn out and we're really easily distracted at this point in time. Now, as human beings, we now have an attention span of 8 seconds. But if we're talking about how long we can sit and do a task for a prolonged period of time, it's between 40 and 50 minutes. And so I would suggest that around 45 minutes to 50 minutes, take a break, 10-15 minutes. Go and do something else. Stretch your legs, get some fresh air if you can, or even swap tasks to something else. And now I'm sure that there's somebody in the background there going, oh, I don't have time to stop every 50 minutes to take a break. Well, if you're focused and concentrating and really concentrating on what you're doing, you can do a lot in 45 minutes. Instead, what happens if you just pooter across the afternoon, you can sit there for an awful long time, not really getting anything done because your concentration is completely gone. I would suggest combining this with a reward system, whatever you motivates you. If it's a chocolate biscuit every 50 minutes, if it's going outside as long as you've completed a particular task, all of these things can help. Last one, Charlie. Having said absolutely everything, if you came in halfway through, my best advice is that be kind. Life is hard. Working at home can be really hard. And you know what? That's okay. Next one, Charlie. So what I would do is I would celebrate the good, productive days. There are going to be days like today where you are really productive, that you just smash through those goals. And if you keep a diary, you can then help that reflect your productivity. And that's really helpful when you have the harder, crappier days. So on these days where you get up, you have no motivation, you don't want to do this, you're extremely tired, you don't know what's happening, be kind to yourself. Imagine if your friend said these things to you. They sent you a text message, they gave you a call and said, you know what, I'm really struggling. What would you say to them? Because I'll guarantee that what you say to them is probably kinder than what you would say to yourself. Take some fresh air, take some exercise. You don't want to go outside, that's fine. Blast up the ABBA to Dancing Queen and dance around your living room. Do something that makes you feel a little bit happy. And on those days, be realistic about what you can do and just work with it. If you fight it, it gets worse. If you can tell those around you that you're struggling today and it's going to take you a little bit longer to return these emails or to do that report, that's fine too. Because you know what? You're not alone. Everybody has these days. And if somebody tells you that they haven't, they're lying. So, last slide, Charlene. My final thoughts are, these are things that I have worked on for the last couple of years. They may not all work for you. You'll need to experiment. My complete dummies guide is put on a clean pair of clothes if you've got them. Clear a space to work, somewhere that you're comfortable with. If you have to work on the couch, that's okay. Just don't try and do it all the time. In terms of sense of control, change what you can, give yourself choices, and just accept what you can. If you can plan your day ahead of time, it's a lot less stressful. Talk to other human beings, give yourself a treat, and be nice. And that includes being nice to yourself. This will end. It will. So what can you learn from that? Are there things about working at home that actually you really enjoy? Did you learn all of this stuff about your family you didn't know? Are there things that you can take away from this in a positive way? Thank you very much. That's everything I have to say on working at home, and I'm interested to see what you all have in terms of other hints and tips.
Wow, thank you so much, Ruby. I feel like giving you a round of applause.
Oh,
That's
thanks.
amazing. I do want to know, though, how you know that I am already dancing around the house to ABBA and the Dancing Queen. I am an 80s girl. That is what I'm doing.
It's the hair, babe. It's the hair.
I can't help it. It is the hair. At least I'm doing the hair. This is a good thing. It's on my list. So I think we all learned a huge amount there. I'm hoping that I can see some questions starting to come through on our chat. So I'll give you guys a couple of minutes, maybe just to gather your thoughts and put a few more questions in there. And again, if you want to raise your hand, if you've got a question, so that if you feel comfortable talking to another human being rather than typing it in. So I can see we've got one from Hannah. So Hannah, I'm just going to wait to allow you to talk so that you can ask Ruby your question. Okay, Hannah.
Hi Ruby, thank you for the presentation. My question is that some people have been feeling more tired than normal lately. Why do you think that is, and what can people do to overcome that?
Hannah, I think that everybody is more tired just now. There's some interesting research going on just now in terms of looking at people's dream patterns. Apparently we're all having these crazy psychedelic, really full-on dreams. And that's partly because it's just a way that we respond to stressful situations. And in my own experience, this is a stressful experience. When we all go through this, stress is tiring, stress takes a toll. And we've been doing now this for what, 5 weeks? So it's inevitable that we're going to feel more tired. We're out with our own routine. Those that we love and care about are also out with our own routine. And that's a really scary thing. And being constantly stressed and worried is exhausting. And so we are going to feel more tired. My advice as a psychologist would be something like, you know, develop a routine, try and stick to it to maintain a sense of normalcy and to try and reduce that kind of feeling of stress. My advice as Ruby would probably be nicer to yourself. If you can, sleep a little bit more. There's lots of research that supports the idea of taking a 20-minute cat nap in the afternoon, put on a timer, see if that helps. Taking fresh air, taking some exercise is also really good. I know that sounds counterintuitive to take exercise when you're feeling tired, but that blood flow and adrenaline can make you feel that little bit more perky. And I think we probably all have ways of helping ourselves when we're feeling rubbish. And I would just use them as a human being.
Great. Thanks, Hannah. That was a great question. Ruby, we've got a question in the chat from Sarah. The question is, do you think we'll go through the same emotional and mental adjustments journey when we eventually return to working in the office that we have getting used to working from home life?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. And we've had this conversation a couple of times at home. What's going to happen when we all go back to work? And I would imagine that, yes, we probably will go through that same roller coaster journey when we then try and go back to going to work and to doing in the office on a more regular basis, because 5 weeks we're probably all pretty acclimatized to now our own little space and our own little bubble and using different ways. And it's quite possible that when we go back to work, we may well use some of the technology that we've been using now and take for granted. We may do this in a more regular way. So it will be really interesting to see what happens when we go back. And I think, Sarah, it's a great idea to keep in mind, and not to fall into the idea that when we go back everything will be fine, because it won't be. And that will make us feel bad if we're like, oh God, now I miss being at home. What's going on? So thank you. I think that's a good point.
It's a great question, and it's good that we're actually starting to think about when we get back to normal rather than being stuck here. Okay, we've got another question from Kirsty. Kirsty, I'm going to unmute you now so that you can ask Ruby your question.
Hi, Susan.
Kirsty, can you speak? No. Okay, what I will do, I will go back to the questions that we've got.
Oh, it's not working, Kirsty. I'm not sure why.
No, I'm not sure what's happening there. You can always type in your question in chat, Kirsty, if that's okay. So we've got a point here from Jez. So good, made perfect sense. We're having a great MS Teams meeting, bandwidth permitting, and that being unmuted improves engagement. Do you agree?
So the question was that you went crunchy a bit, Susan. So it's being unmuted helps. Yeah. So yeah, I think that being unmuted makes you feel like you're a valued member of the team. If you are muted in an MS Teams, I would imagine it would make you feel less valuable. And that whatever you have to say is not valuable enough to unmute you. Sorry, Kirsty, that's not meant to mean that you're unvaluable. I think that's just a technical glitch. I think it would be difficult to keep me muted, but yeah, I think that's a fair point. If you're doing a lot of MS Teams stuff where people are regularly being muted as a start, that's tricky.
Absolutely, and it's interesting. It's a whole new etiquette that's we're having to learn about using online platforms. Okay, here's another question in chat, Ruby. This is from Hannah. It's difficult to stay focused at the moment. Any advice on how to try to avoid distraction and remain focused on work while working from home?
Okay. So as a psychologist, my suggestion again would be to do something where you're structuring your time. And so it's more difficult to become distracted. My thing about not having everything on the table is a good one. And I think that also relates to not having every tab up on your screen. If you're not working on that document in the next 15 minutes, close it down. If you're not doing stuff on that particular platform, close it down. And if you have to do something which is more complex, so you maybe have to write a report, close your email for 20 minutes, because having those little email notifications come in the bottom part of your box is really distracting.
Absolutely.
As a human, I would suggest motivating yourself. We're all working at home, and if we're honest, if you work a little bit harder and you don't get distracted, you can finish earlier. Or you can go for a walk or have a longer lunch or do something that is sufficiently attractive that it motivates you to do it.
It's interesting, all these habits that we're going to have to break out of, all these mindsets that we've got in a corporate life that we've kind of got to break out of to thrive while we're working from home. Here's another one from Sarah. I've seen in several online sources that practicing gratitude, e.g. keeping a journal, which you mentioned earlier, can help boost your moods. What's your thoughts on this?
Yes, so I think I'm not very good at this, and as nobody else is in my house, I will tell you about this. So it's actually my partner that's much better at this. And a couple of years ago, he left his job, and it was quite a difficult time. And what he did, as I later found out, is that every morning he said 3 things to himself that he was grateful for. And he now does this every morning as part of his routine. And this has made a huge difference to how you come at the day. If you are grateful for having those that you love around you, that you are grateful for your health, that you're grateful for your job that you love, or whatever it is, can really change your attitude. And we can't change most of the stuff around us, but we can change our attitude and how we feel about it. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. If that helps, stick with it.
Great. I've got 2 more questions for you, Ruby. One comment though, Darren's made a really good comment about, so I think remote working has so much benefits for the economy, society, environment. There is a question here. Do you think working could be the new norm?
Tricky question, as I'm not an economist, but it's not. It's difficult because people don't like change. If I think about my normal working, talking about technology uptake, people don't like change. And so I think a lot of what we're going through is a resistance to change to working at home. So I don't honestly know what will happen when we go back. I think that the environmental advantages and economic advantages of doing stuff like working at home or remote working, at least partly during the week, would be really helpful. But it depends on what happens when we go back. Do the majority of people then want to go back to how it was before because that gives them a sense of consistency? I'm not sure. Yeah. We certainly have the infrastructure now for it.
Absolutely. It's amazing how people have adapted so quickly. One last question. One last question and one just to sum up. We haven't really talked about children at home, and a lot of people have got the twin issues of work commitments, but also children at home and not being, how do they balance that? So the question from Kirsty, so thanks Kirsty for writing it in, seeing as I couldn't unmute you. Any tips on managing the guilt feelings when having to ignore children at home? I guess it maybe wasn't so much ignoring them, but when you're trying to work and they maybe want you to do things with them and you have to say no because you're working. So any tips and hints about how to deal with children at home?
I would probably say if you have children at home that you are a superhero and you're doing an amazing bang up job. Please don't feel guilty. I know that you will, and that is a normal reaction, and your feelings are perfectly valid for feeling guilty about ignoring them. But you're probably doing a bang up job of trying to balance it, and that is hard, and to try not to hold on to those feelings of guilt. If you do feel guilty, let them wash over you and remind yourself that, that you've given them, you were playing in the morning, you're going to do something later. Perhaps remind them that, mummy's working just now. I appreciate that you want to do something, but I have to do this. Once I have done this, we will then go out into the garden, or we will then go and do something with macaroni or whatever you want.
Yeah.
It's natural to feel guilty.
Absolutely. There are a number of more questions there. So the other people who've got questions, you can maybe keep the conversation going on LinkedIn with Ruby later. But I'd just like to, there's a great question came in, just for your last question to finish up, Ruby. How can we change our mindsets from weekday to weekend? So we're coming up for Friday afternoon, so it probably is in a lot of people's heads, especially you're going to be on holiday next week to your kitchen, I believe.
I know, the sunny kitchen.
What's your advice on how to change that mindset from from Friday to the weekend?
Okay, yeah. So I don't know when everybody finishes, but on principle, let's say that everybody is going to take an early finish. You're going to finish at 4, so we've got 4 hours left to go. I personally, what I do is I wear work clothes, and I put my work clothes on in the morning. And when it comes to that time, once I've turned the PC off, I go and change. And I know that sounds a little bit silly, but it's a really great way of changing out of being in work mode. If you're doing your work on your kitchen table, put it all away. Put it all away and put it out of sight so that you're visually changing those environmental cues so you're not thinking about it. If you can, do something that sandwiches between your work end and your weekend start. So if you're taking your government regulated exercise, do it then. Get changed or have a shower or do something that indicates physically that we're no longer working, we are now relaxing. Take some exercise, go outside. If you need to talk through what's happened during the week, just get it out. Even if it's you're talking to yourself in the shower, okay, I did the webinar, that's great, I've checked my emails, okay, I have nothing else to do for the next week. And then try and really embrace the weekend. You know, it's Friday night, what do you want to do? Let's play Scrabble, let's have a glass of wine. Really be that weekend person. Even if it's wearing silly weekend clothes. Last weekend, I dressed up as 90s neon raver, had the full sparkly earrings, everything. I went nowhere, but I felt like I was in weekend mode.
Ruby, that's a great way to end. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Susan.
The practical, down-to-earth advice has just been fantastic. I think we're all overwhelmed with all these emails of what we should be doing, and I think everything you've told us today is just great. I know from my point of view, I'm going to keep dancing to ABBA.
Good.
I am going to take your advice about the reward system. I'm going to come up with the reward system and being kind to myself. And I think I'm also going to, I've got a copy of Frozen somewhere. I'm going to sit and listen and sing.
You've got to sing though.
Let it go. Absolutely. Okay, guys, thank you very much, Ruby. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for everybody coming in.
Clap to everybody. This is a real clap, not a virtual clap. On the slide on the screen there, you can see a little QR code. So if you'd like to find out our next Tech20s that are coming up, if you click on there, you'll also find a recording of this webinar on our website quite soon. Our next Tech20 will be next week at 11 AM, and it would be great if you can come along and join us. And I hope that you all have a lovely weekend. Remember to get changed out of your work clothes, get outside and dance to ABBA. Have a great weekend. Thank you, everybody.